and civil society, distinguished guests, comrades and friends. I am honored to present to this esteemed House the fourth budget of our fifth administration, a budget that will take us to the end of our term under the leadership of Premier David Makhura. Let me begin, honourable members, by tabling the following documents for consideration by this House: the Appropriation Bill for 2018, the explanatory memorandum to the bill, estimates of provincial revenue and expenditure, estimates of capital expenditure, the socio-economic review outlook, and a copy of my speech. Honourable members, 2 weeks ago, when President Cyril Ramaphosa began the State of the Nation address, he paid tribute to the late former President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, whose centenary we celebrate this year, with the words, "We have dedicated this year to his memory, and we will devote our every action, every effort, every utterance to the realization of his vision for a democratic, just, and equitable society." Guided by his example, we will use this year to reinforce our commitment to ethical behavior and ethical leadership. In celebrating the centenary of Nelson Mandela, we are not merely honoring the past, we are building the future. We are continuing the long walk he began to build a society in which all may be free, in which all may be equal before the law, and in which all may share in the wealth of our land and have a better life. We are building a country where a person's prospects are determined by their own initiative and hard work, and not by the color of their skin, place of birth, gender, language, or income of their parents. President Ramaphosa has created a new mood of hope in our country and in our province. A new optimism that our economy can recover and transform to offer meaningful opportunities to those who have been marginalized for so long. This new dawn energizes us to build partnerships, to tackle poverty, inequality, and unemployment. It inspires us, once again, to confront intractable problems. Last week, Premier Makhura, in his State of the Province address, said, "The new dawn requires not only that we dream again or rehabilitate our wounded dreams. It calls for new dreams that imagine a civilization beyond the present, a new civilization that is premised on equity and social justice and puts the primacy of human well-being above everything else. The new dawn also calls for a new dream of politics in which public officials uphold high standards of accountability, integrity, and ethics, and show respect for its citizens." Honourable members, the 2018 Gauteng budget I table for your consideration today sets out how this provincial government will fund our commitment to equity and social justice. We outline how we have used and will continue to use Gauteng's massive procurement spend to improve public facilities, transform our economy, and create work. We explain how Gauteng Province has managed to raise own revenue to compensate for cuts in the equitable share. We tell the story of our contribution to restoring public confidence in procurement sound financial management, and public accountability. Our new dawn is based on the reality of recovery in the global and domestic economy. At an international level, there are improvements in investment, trade, commodity prices, and business and consumer confidence. World growth is expected to reach nearly 4% this year. Growth in emerging markets will reach 5%, with healthy trends expected in China, Brazil, and India. Our national economy is projected to grow only by 1.5% this year, but inflation has stabilized, the stock market has risen, the rand has strengthened, and there is a welcome recovery in investor sentiment and business confidence. As early as the 11th of January this year, Goldman Sachs noted that investors are looking for the next big emerging market story. South Africa is at the top of the list of potential candidates, provided we continue to consolidate fiscal expenditure and offer policy certainty. Allow me, honourable members, on behalf of the Gauteng Provincial Government, to congratulate Minister Nhlanhla Nene and Deputy Minister Mondli Gongobele on their recent appointments to lead our National Treasury. Both the Minister and the Deputy Minister of Finance have, from different perspectives, a deep understanding of the complex pressures facing provincial and municipal governments. Honourable Premier, last Monday, you reminded us of the challenges we face in relation to population immigration and our equitable share. Gauteng's municipal finances also face rising debt levels due to high levels of unemployment and increased demand for free basic services without commensurate increases in revenue. I now feel re-energized to tackle these long-standing and intractable problems. So, Honourable Premier, send me. The past 2 years have been difficult ones for the city region and our people. While ours remains the largest provincial economy in the country, growth has been hard hit by low investment and confidence. Supporting economic recovery is a pressing priority for this government. We remain deeply concerned that in this, the richest province in the country, 1/3 of our residents officially live in conditions of poverty. 1 in 3 economically active citizens are without work. To deal decisively with these issues, Premier Makura last Monday called on the Gauteng government, the private sector, organised labour and civil society to accelerate delivery on the following programmes. Tsepo 1 million, our partnership to address youth unemployment, the reindustrialisation of the Gauteng economy, revitalisation of the township economy, modernising key sectors of the economy and the state to harness the opportunities of the 4th Industrial Revolution, delivery of new infrastructure and maintenance of existing infrastructure, intensifying the fight against corruption, collusion and maladministration, reconnecting with our communities so they become the primary drivers of renewal and change, changing the culture of the public service so we treat citizens with dignity, compassion and professionalism. Madam Speaker, National Treasury, in their budget review, has described the 2018 budget as a budget that outlines a series of measures to rebuild economic confidence and return public finances to a sustainable path. Central to this objective is a decision to narrow the budget deficit and stabilize government borrowing over the next 3 to 5 years. To achieve this, National Treasury has announced both measures to grow revenue and reduce expenditure to contain spending. The Gauteng Provincial Government welcomes the national government announcement last week to review the basket of VAT zero-rated items. And we look forward to ensuring that Gauteng's voice is heard in the course of this process. Budget 2018 also announced further cuts to our equitable share and our conditional grants. With current high levels of in-migration to our province, health and education in particular will still face spending pressure. To close funding gaps, we are primarily dependent on provincial revenue and off-budget investment and partnerships. Honourable members, we understand tough times mean citizens more than ever before are dependent on government services. Accordingly, we will not pass these cuts on to provincial departments. Instead, we will use our own provincial resources to absorb the cuts and mitigate the spending pressures. Honourable members, since 2014, Provincial Treasury has raised a total of 21 billion in own revenue, mainly from motor vehicle licenses, patient fees, gambling and liquor licenses, and interest revenue from our short-term investments. We are pleased to announce that the new regulations for the gambling taxes were approved by the Provincial Legislature Committee for Scrutiny of Subordinate Legislation and will come into effect this year. In preparation for the 2018-19 budget, Provincial Treasury asked all departments to submit information on partnership agreements, which bring in support from the private sector and civil society in the provision of public services. I can share with this House today that our departments have over 400 million rands worth of service delivery partnerships. The largest contribution to off-budget investment in the built environment has been made by the Department of Human Settlements. To date, this department has launched 7 mega human settlement programs that will collectively provide over 80,000 housing units. These projects have collectively attracted 50.7 billion rand in private sector investment. By June this year, 7 projects coordinated by the Gauteng Infrastructure Finance Agency will have reached financial close and be in the implementation phase. These include the Jewellery Manufacturing Precinct, the West Rand Logistics Hub, the Lindley Wastewater Treatment Works, the Trigen Cogen plants at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, and the Tshwane Innovation Hub Enterprise Buildings 2 and 3, and the Rooftop Solar Panels Project. Collectively, these projects are worth more than 4 billion rand. Honourable members, in these times of rising direct and indirect taxes, our province's breadwinners are expected to sacrifice hard-earned money for higher VAT and fuel costs. Accordingly, our citizens have the right to know that their taxes are put to the best possible use and that this government is not squandering them through poor financial management or ill-conceived programs and projects. Provincial Treasury remains committed to cutting waste and improving financial management, so we ensure that the money we have is used to put human well-being above everything else. Guided by National Treasury Instruction Note 1 of 2013-14, we have reduced budgets on non-core expenditure items by 10% per annum over the previous MTEF, which released 415 million to fund core programs. All Gauteng departments and municipalities have worked hard to ensure better financial management and greater public accountability in the use of public funds. This has led to 23 departments and entities boasting clean audits and all others receiving unqualified audit opinions. Honourable members, I'm happy to share with you today that for the 3rd year in a row, all Gauteng municipalities have sustained their record of unqualified audits. This includes Randwest Municipality, which has achieved an unqualified audit as a consolidated municipality for the first time. We also congratulate Midvaal Municipality for once again maintaining its clean audit. The open tender procurement process remains our flagship program to ensure we systematically eliminate irregular expenditure in Gauteng. To date, 75 projects have now progressed successfully through this system. In the coming year, our intention is that all new departmental tenders will be publicly adjudicated. In support of this program, the Provincial Treasury has now completed training of 1,068 supply chain officials throughout the province. I know my fellow MECs will be happy when I announce that Provincial Treasury has improved its open tender project management capacity by contracting external resources to ensure we do not delay departmental procurement with inefficiency and red tape. Now I need my fellow MECs to commit to insourcing the necessary technical expertise to ensure tender specifications are adequately prepared the first time round. In November, I explained to this House the work that the Executive Council Subcommittee on Health is doing to stabilize the finances of the Provincial Health Department and mitigate the risk that accruals pose to the provincial fiscus. This committee has conducted a comprehensive review of the health budget to understand the root causes of overspending and ensure corrective action leads to sustainable solutions. Our research reveals that over the past 14 years, per capita spending on healthcare for Gauteng's residents has increased from 2,500 to 4,500 Rand per person per year. Over a similar period of time, to meet the ever-increasing demand for services, the department has employed an additional 25,000 healthcare professionals. Ongoing under-budgeting by the department for personnel crowds out spending on goods and services, resulting in accruals or unpaid invoices. In effect, the department is borrowing from its suppliers to fund current services. This situation is not acceptable and it cannot continue. Accordingly, we are working with the Department of Health on a package of remedial measures, which include shifting resources to fund personnel and goods and services, cutting expenditure on non-core costs, holding managers to account for expenditure within budget in every health facility, putting a moratorium on new infrastructure projects and services until we've paid off all the accruals, and prioritizing filling frontline clinical posts. Once the debt is eliminated and operations are within budget, savings can be redirected to support the extension of infrastructure or new services. In this year of renewal and recovery, we are asking all our health professionals, organized labor, our patients and the citizens of Gauteng to support this package of measures. We are asking you to lend a hand to stabilize our health system. By stabilizing our health budget now, we will in future be able to realize our dream of building the national health insurance system here in Gauteng. Provincial Treasury will soon conduct budget reviews in education and the Department of Infrastructure Development. This will help direct reforms so accruals don't become unmanageable. Madam Speaker, the Gauteng Provincial Government is proud of our track record in using this government's massive procurement spend to drive meaningful transformation, empowerment, job creation, and economic inclusion in the mainstream economy. Over the past 4 years, 57.7 billion Rand has been spent on procuring goods and services from 12,000 firms owned by historically disadvantaged individuals. Included in the overall figure are 7,400 companies owned by women, 5,500 companies owned by youth, and 2,100 companies owned by people living with disabilities. In the year to date, our infrastructure departments have spent a total of 577 million on subcontracting township builders, plumbers, and other artisans. We welcome this new contribution to our overall township economic revitalization program. Given the important role township enterprises play in our overall transformation agenda, we are happy to report that 17 billion rand has now been spent over the past 4 years procuring goods and services from these businesses. Our township economy spend has been increasing at about 13% per annum. By the end of this financial year, we will have utilized almost half of the 9,500 township companies we have on our database. Our supplier development program is working well. 1,500 of our targeted 2,500 new suppliers have been verified, and their services have been advertised to our sister departments. 500 have now been through development programs and introduced to a range of organizations offering further financial and non-financial support. Because we understand the significant role micro-enterprises play, particularly in providing youth employment, we are now working with our sister departments to design a developmental pipeline. This prototype will model how we move startups from informal operations through developmental programs to access markets, including government procurement, and onwards to becoming sustainable businesses in their own right, with a range of business opportunities outside of government. Later this year, we will host a supplier development workshop where we will reach consensus on this model and build partnerships with the private sector and civil society for its implementation. As a provincial government, we look forward to the publication by National Treasury for public comment of the proposed public procurement bill during the month of March. We hope to use our experience in transformative procurement to comment and support this legislation. Tuma Tina. The provincial government also understands the importance of paying our suppliers on time. In the year to date, 98% of our invoices, with the exception of health, education, and infrastructure, have been paid within 30 days. In fact, the majority of our departments are now paying 93% of their invoices within 15 days. The Department of Education has paid for 85% of its invoices within 30 days, and 3/4 of these were paid within 15 days. Well done, MEC Lesufi. The Gauteng government's 42.2 billion rand infrastructure spend has made a major contribution to stimulating economic activity, creating employment, and raising living standards in communities across our province over the last 4 years. Our research indicates that during the construction phase, this spend has generated 26 billion rands worth of economic activity in our economy, ensured Gauteng households receive 15 billion rands worth of additional income, generated 7 billion in additional government revenue, and, most importantly, created and sustained 95,000 direct jobs and 194,000 indirect and induced jobs. Honourable members, today the Gauteng provincial government tables a budget of 121 billion, which increases to 135 billion in the outer year of the medium term. This year alone, we are adding 9 billion to departmental baselines, a huge increase under the current difficult circumstances. The province receives 114.9 billion in the form of transfers from national government. The equitable share is 93.4 billion, and conditional grants equal 21.5 billion. This year, we aim to collect 6 billion in own revenue, and this will grow to 6.7 billion in the outer year of the medium term. In the coming 2018 medium-term expenditure framework, We are setting aside 31.8 billion for infrastructure. This significant allocation will be invested in our different development corridors over the next 3 years as follows. The Southern Corridor will receive investments worth 3.9 billion, 3.5 billion for the Western Corridor, 4 billion invested in the Eastern Corridor, 6.1 billion in the Central Corridor, and 5.1 billion invested over 3 years in the Northern Corridor. The Department of Human Settlement will receive just over half of this budget, an amount of 16.2 billion over the medium term. The Department of Human Settlement will receive just over half of this budget, an amount of 16.2 billion over the medium term. This will include the renovation and upgrading of community residential units, commonly known as hostels, Honourable Dlamini. Over the medium term, we are setting aside 666.5 million towards this program. In the current financial year, we will be spending 279 million for upgrading and renovating 17 of these facilities. We have also allocated the department 43.7 million to settle debts owed to municipalities in provincially owned hostels. The Department of Roads and Transport will receive 6.4 billion in infrastructure money over the medium term. The most significant project to start in the design phase this year is the PWV 15, the first brand new Gauteng highway to be built since the 1970s. Together with all Gauteng citizens, Provincial Treasury welcomes Premier Makura's announcement to approach President Ramaphosa to discuss a different mechanism to fund public transport and our road network. We agree that e-tolls have not worked and have been rejected as a public financing mechanism by our citizens. Honourable members, the Department of Economic Development continues to lead our drive for economic recovery, re-industrialisation and transformation. The budget for the department this year is 1.5 billion, and key projects are 11 million for the expansion of the automotive supplier park, 56 million for the upgrading of township hubs and industrial parks, 67.3 million for small business development at the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller. This year, the Tshwane Innovation Hub will receive 35.5 million to implement programs such as startup support for township companies. To address the productive and employment potential of the so-called fourth industrial revolution, the Gauteng Departments of Economic Development and E-Government jointly hosted the Gauteng Technology and Innovation Conference in January this year. The conference agreed that the first step in building an innovation ecosystem in Gauteng is to set up an innovation forum consisting of government, the private sector, higher education, and civil society. The immediate but not exclusive tasks of the forum are to increase investment in research and development, advocate production and consumption modernization in Gauteng's key economic sectors, promote startups, particularly amongst youth and township entrepreneurs, and work with the education sector to ensure we get the right skills to support new career paths, economic productivity, and entrepreneurship. To support the ongoing provincial modernization drive and continue to connect all government institutions to the broadband network, the Department of E-Government is allocated R1 billion over the next 3 years. Agriculture and rural development remains one of our key economic enablers. The department budget grows from 957 million this year to over R1 billion in the outer year of the medium term. 421 million is set aside for agriculture and rural development, and key allocations are 68 million for agro-processing and agri-parks, 92.3 million for farmer support and development programs, including fencing, boreholes, piggeries, broilers, layers, fertilizers, pesticides, implements, and seeds. 21.8 million for the rollout of the Community Vets program to support small and emerging producers, and 30.2 million for community backyard and school food gardens. Honourable members, in this centenary year of the late former President Nelson Mandela, our Gauteng government remains firmly guided by his dictum that education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. Accordingly, our allocation to the Department of Education in this financial year increases from 41.8 billion to 45.2 billion this year. Key allocations include 3.2 billion for direct transfers to public ordinary schools, early childhood development sites, and special schools. 2.7 billion for the special school sector, which caters for learners with intellectual and other disabilities. 1.2 billion to provide 1.5 million learners with a hot meal at school every day. 1 billion to transport learners who live more than 5 kilometers from their nearest school. 238 million to support the continued rollout of the e-learning strategy. 2 billion rand for textbooks, stationery, school furniture, and other learner support materials, and 196 million towards teacher development and support initiatives. 159 million, honourable members, will go towards improving the grade 12 performance and increase the bachelor pass rate. In his State of the Province address, Premier Makore indicated that the Tsepo 1 Million project, launched 2 years ago, has concluded more than 40 partnership agreements with major private sector corporations to open opportunities for demand-led skills development, job placement, and entrepreneurship. Our Premier indicated that 460,000 young people have already benefited from this initiative. In this financial year, we will contribute over R500 million for youth development, made up as follows: 117 million for Tsepo 1 million, 17 million for the expanded public works program to create 3,000 work opportunities, 76.8 million for the National Youth Service Program, which includes Sivoseni, 261 million to provide 3,000 bursaries, learnerships, and scholarships to universities and TVET colleges, 186 million for government internships, 50 million for the Accelerated Youth Placement Program hosted by the Department of Economic Development, 43.7 million for the Welfare to Work program, which will help a further 34,000 women, inclusive of single mothers, to move from dependence on childcare grants to sustainable self-supporting economic opportunities. And consistent with the commitment made earlier in this speech, the Gauteng Department of Health will receive the largest share of the provincial budget this year. The budget increases from 41.9 billion to 46.4 billion this year. Key allocations are 26.7 billion is allocated to fund the personnel budget, rising from 25 billion last year, and 15.8 billion to fund goods and services, rising from 12.8 billion. One of the commitments arising from the Executive Council Subcommittee on Health is to settle our long-standing debt to the National Health Laboratory Services. Following intensive negotiations, I am happy to report the following. The Department of Health will continue to pay all current invoices in full, and the payment of the old invoices will be settled within a 24-month period. Madam Speaker, in these difficult times when our economy cannot create sufficient jobs for our people, many households are dependent on support from our poverty alleviation programs. This year, we have allocated 4.9 billion to the Department of Social Development to be used as follows: 293 million for services for Gauteng's aged, which includes resourcing 26 community-based care facilities that provide support to 16,000 older persons. 2.3 billion for services for children, of which 280 million is to fund new early childhood development centres with toys, libraries and playgroups, minor renovations including the ablution facilities, standardized meals for the poorest for children from our poorest wards, and capacity building. This program will benefit 107,000 children. 137 million is allocated for services to people with disabilities, which includes implementation of independent living programs and increasing income earning opportunities in protective workshops. 175 million is made available over the medium term to provide 70,000 people in the poorest households with food parcels this year. Over the 2018 MTEF, an additional 156 million is allocated to support cooperatives that are producing school uniforms and dignity packs for our learners. These cooperatives will produce 151,000 uniforms and 1.2 million dignity packs this year. Altogether, more than 30,000 vulnerable people benefit from work opportunities in these cooperatives. Honourable members, the painful stories of individuals and families affected by substance abuse are always told at our Interesano outreach programs. Over the next 3 years, this provincial government is allocating over R1 billion to fight substance abuse through both prevention and treatment programs. Abuse of women and girls affects our daily lives and shocks us all with its brutality. An amount of 245.9 million over the medium term is set aside for the expansion of the Isibindi program and the prevention of violence against women and girls. To ensure our social development department can absorb the social work graduates whom we have funded, we have set aside 237 million over the medium term. The Department of Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation leads our campaign to promote nation building and social cohesion. This year, the department is allocated 942 million. Amongst its key programs is 10.2 million for the Premier Social Cohesion and Holiday Games, 35 million for bidding and hosting competitive sporting events, 5.6 million for the Nelson Mandela Remembrance Walk, 6.5 million for the Tricolour Games, 84 million for the construction of multi-purpose sports courts. Honourable members, fighting crime at a community level remains an important aspect of our program to promote safe and cohesive communities in our province. Accordingly, the Department of Community Safety receives 49 million this year to improve community-centred policing, which includes our CPFs. A further 65.6 million is allocated over 3 years to fight crimes against women and children. This includes monitoring forensic social workers within the criminal justice system, legal experts to strengthen services at Ikaya Letemba, monitoring the family justice support system, and expansion of regional victim offices to support the victims of gender-based violence. Because road safety remains a priority for all of us, this year we allocate 121.9 million to reduce road fatalities through targeted law enforcement operations. We will continue, honourable members, to make good on our commitment to pay for all services rendered to the province by our municipalities. We have set aside 901 million this year, 954 million next year, and R1 billion in the outer year towards the payment of rates and taxes. We have also allocated 528 million to pay municipal bills at no-fee public schools. The grant committee will continue to be an interface between departments and municipalities in fast-tracking payments and resolving disputes over municipal debt. An amount of 23 million is allocated over the medium term to the Office of the Premier to continue strengthening the fight against corruption through the Integrity Management Programme. Provincial Treasury receives an additional 23 million over the medium term to fund probity audits to improve transparency in government procurement. A further 29 million is allocated over the 2018 MTEF to provide for in-house and independent forensic investigations. Honourable members, as you all know, we are currently awaiting the final report from Justice Moseneke on the Life Esidimeni tragedy. What we know at this stage is that agreement has been reached with the families of the victims in relation to individual compensation. An amount of 28 million is allocated in this budget to the Department of the Premier to honour this commitment. Allow me, honourable members, to take a moment to repeat in this House my words to the families when I gave evidence at the hearing in January. I said then that the testimony of suffering and cruelty I listened to in the course of the hearings has never left me. It filled me with shame that I was part of this government when this tragedy happened. If, as a result of the testimony I gave at the hearings, you feel that there were things which I should have done as MEC of Finance, which I did not do, I apologize deeply and sincerely. Honourable members, I think it is appropriate to end with a quote from our national poet laureate, Kiorapetse Kgossitsile, whom we laid to rest in January. In his poem, Wounded Dreams, he wrote, "Though the present is a dangerous place to live, possibility remains what moves us. We are all involved. Indifference would simply be evidence of the will to die or trying to straddle some fence that no one has ever seen. Together, we can and must rehabilitate our wounded dreams, to reclaim and nourish the song of the quality of our vibrant being as evidence of how it is to be alive. Indeed, the possibility of transformation, economic recovery, and sound, ethical, compassionate, and accountable government is what inspires us in this ANC-led Gauteng city region to rehabilitate our wounded dreams. Now is the time of possibility, when we must join hands with all who care about our province and our people. Now is the time to nourish our song that tells of the new dawn premised on equity and social justice, the new dawn that puts the primacy of human well-being above all else. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Premier David Makura for his steadfast leadership and his enduring vision of hope, renewal, and change in our province. My colleagues in the Executive Council and the MMCs of Finance in municipalities for the strong bonds of cooperation and shared commitment to public service. The honourable members of this House, and in particular the Finance Portfolio Committee under the able leadership of Honourable Sakiwe Kumalo, for their oversight and advice. Team Treasury, under the firm and consistent leadership of Ms. Nomfundo Chabalala, who always strive for more effectiveness and efficiency in the leadership of our public finances. The citizens of Gauteng, who have given me an opportunity to serve. And lastly, my family, Gita, who is with us today, Sean and Gwanda, whose constructive criticism and support motivate me each and every day. I thank you.